Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out this evening. I'm Dan Porterfield, the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. It's an incredible pleasure to have all of you in the room for this panel on this extremely important topic. I don't know if she's in the room, but our leader in creating Aspen Ideas Health is Ruth Katz. And if we could say a word of applause for Ruth, maybe she'll hear it wherever she is. Some say, Walter might know, some say this has been the best Ideas Health ever. And so it's certainly, this panel is definitely going to be the best panel ever. And so I'm very pleased to welcome you to a discussion of the cutting edge field of neuroarts. And with the authors of a New York Times bestseller, Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. Who better to moderate this discussion than Walter Isaacson, who is the beating heart of the Aspen Institute and led this place so brilliantly for 14 years. Walter, welcome home. Thank you so much.
And a round of applause for Dan. He has taken this place to new heights. And I just came to the campus today. It looks so much better. Well, good work.
There'll be more time for reflection about this guy and all that he means to the Aspen Institute. Today you get to watch him as a journalist, interviewing some fascinating thinkers and leaders. So we have Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross, who are the co-authors of Your Brain on Art. And they'll be joined a little bit later, I think, on stage by the legendary jazz musician, Fred Johnson, to bring home the power of art. And Fred, thank you for being here today. So, Susan is the founder and executive director of the International Arts and Mind Lab, a neuroaesthetics initiative from the Brain Science Institute at Johns Hopkins University in the School of Medicine. Among other accomplishments, she's the co-director of the NeuroArts Blueprint Project in partnership with the Aspen Institute and Ruth Katz, and we're really proud of everything you're doing, Susan. Thank you. And then Ivy Ross is here, and Ivy is Vice President of Design for Google's hardware organization. Over the past 6 years, she and her team have launched more than 50 products, winning some 240 plus global design awards. She's held a range of executive positions, including the presidencies of several companies I think you know pretty well, like Calvin Klein, Swatch, Coach, Mattel, Bausch & Lomb, and Gap. Pretty amazing. How they met is it's a backstory that maybe will come out under Walter's penetrating questions. But that's fun. But also something I learned, and then I'll exit, is that you had the experience of coming to the Aspen Design Conference with your father many years ago.
Yeah.
So that's pretty great. Maybe that'll come up. Thank you all for being here. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Well, I got an obvious first question. How'd y'all meet?
You're scary.
I take my cues from Dan.
I see. Well, maybe I'll start and Ivy can jump in. So as Dan said, I am at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and the program that I run, the International Arts and Mind Lab, has something called Luminary Scholars Board, and it's people who do amazing things in the world. We have people like Benj Pasek, who wrote Dear Evan Hansen, and we have a number of Nobel Prize winners, and we are looking to expand that work in 2017, and I had remembered Ivy because I had started a company called Curiosity Kits, which were hands-on learning materials in arts, sciences, and world cultures. And about the same time, Ivy was leading the girls division at Mattel. And I remember how cool she was because she put tennis shoes on Barbie's feet. So, you know, Barbie, for the women in the room, always had feet like this, and she was able to, like, you know, fix her arches. So, of course, I fell in love. And so I cold called her. I sent her a LinkedIn, and I said, hey, I'm doing this. Would you be interested in talking to me? And she said yes.
I swiped right, because there was, I get about 500 LinkedIns a day, and I go delete, 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 and like Arts and Mind Lab. I mean, I'm an artist who studied psychology. Like, what is this? Yes. And then we booked a 30-minute meeting that turned into 3 hours. And the next thing we know, we have a salon in my home between neuroscientists and artists. Susan says, I've always wanted to write this book. Do you want to do it with me? And I said, this is the book I've been waiting for.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
I've actually read parts of it twice. And what I really loved is there's a part of it where you say, okay, certain first steps. One is curiosity.
Yep.
Number 2 is playful exploration. And number 3, I think, is something like keen observation or keen awareness of your situation. And what that made me think of is it's exactly what Leonardo did. This
I'm so glad you
total
said that.
curiosity just like, why is the sky blue? Not curiosity for a purpose, but for its own sake. And then sort of a playful exploration. And then he could watch things like birds' wings and say, which ones go up faster and which ones go down faster. He would observe things that you and I see, but we don't observe. And so it made me think maybe that's why he made the link between art and science and technology.
And we've lost that, right? You know, we've lost that curiosity. We've lost that sense of wonder, that playful exploration, the sensorial awareness where we are really just tapping into temperature, light, sound, smell. And then the fourth attribute, we call that aesthetic mindset. This fourth attribute is whether you're a maker or a beholder. And the truth is, we're all makers and we're all beholders. But we've been so shamed in some way to believe if you're not great at it, you shouldn't be doing it.
That was another thing in the book, which is even if you doodle, it's really good for you.
It's really good for you. It's really good for you.
Yeah.
Better attention, can retain and retrieve information better. And it's the kind of thing that we got our hands slapped for when we were kids. So, you know, a lot of us don't do those things anymore.
Yeah, so in fact, when I'm doodling in a meeting now, my boss gives me a dirty look. I'm like, I'm actually retaining more of what
Right.
you're saying if I wasn't doodling. But you know, you talk about those 3 attributes, and I think play, which people think the opposite of play is work, and it's actually depression, is doing something different than we do every day without a prescribed outcome. And we are so transactional and so outcome-based today, and that we don't give ourselves permission to play. Never mind watch the way birds'
And
wings
the word
are
you
fluttering.
use is not just play, use the word playful.
Yes.
Which is a sort of a more active version of that, because you can doodle in a playful way, you can do all
Right.
sorts of things in a
Right.
playful way.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, a lot of these arts, people stopped doing that. We did the arts as kids, and then someone told us that wasn't the way to do that, or to draw that, or you're never going to be an artist, and we gave up a lot of these things that are our birthright.
Alan Weil, health
Yeah,
interviewed us today, and he actually put this in perspective, and I'd never thought about it quite like this. He was like, you know, kind of like, what was the original sin? Like, what happened? Why did we move away from the arts? We know through evolutionary biology, E.O. Wilson's work, that we are literally physiologically hardwired. So how did we get so far away from our birthright? And I almost think it's like a dimmer where we didn't flip the switch. It just got lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And, you know, you can go through different phases in history where, you know, Da Vinci, you know, was an amazing, curious person in lots of different fields. And then you kind of work your way to the Renaissance, where we started to value rational thought over the artist, over the creative person, over even mysticism. And then, you know, it goes more and more and more, productivity, industrial revolution. And so we kind of like went to sleep on the arts. And I think this COVID woke us up in a lot of ways to what we need.
One of the things in your book about the arts is the fact that we all, as kids, had many traits, one of which is we were curious. You'd walk through an airport and you'd see a kid say, why is the light that way? Why does the door move? And finally, a grown-up would do what all grown-ups do in that situation, which is say, quit asking so many stupid questions. And so we kick the curiosity out. But also, any kid thinks they're a great artist until finally they're told they can't do art, and then they're intimidated by it afterwards.
Shamed.
Yeah.
Really shamed. Yeah, you know, it's
Yeah.
really true.
Sir Ken Robinson had a great story where he said everyone he went to nursery school, who's an artist, everyone raised their hand, and then progressively until he got to 3rd grade, and no one was an artist. Because, you know, some teacher had come through and said, no, that's not the way you draw that.
And one of the things that you try to teach in this book is, who in this room is an artist? Okay, you see, but people aren't raising their hand. There are some great artists here because of this, but we're all can be artists. I mean, that's the point you say, is that don't be intimidated, take up art, take up dance, take up poetry.
Yeah,
all
no,
of
you
which-
don't have to be good at all to reap the benefits in terms of for your brain and your overall health.
But it's counterintuitive because the more you do it, the better you get. And the better you get, the more creative, the more innovative, the more collaborative, the way you really engage in the world. You add that curiosity. So it's sort of remarkable that the things that businesses want are those attributes, yet we're not teaching them in schools. And so there's this huge disconnect between what we need and what we teach, and yet when you do it, you actually build those capacities, you build that resilience. And the younger we start with kids, they're more able to cope with all the sort of life issues that come down the pack. And there's some beautiful work, science in the book around learning and how myelination increases when you're doing a music activity, how brain structure actually gets bigger and changes, how cognitive functions increase, things like self-regulation increase, executive function. So all of these unbelievable skills that we need for our adult life, we leave on the table when we're not bringing these arts experiences forward.
You mentioned Ken Robinson and his educational theories. And I think he talks about the fact, raises the question of why do we leave all this behind? And part of it is I think we became infatuated with No Child Left Behind, meaning reading and science and tests and all. And art is something that's not quantified in school that has to be done. Right?
Well, when Sputnik arrived, all of a sudden the art got pushed out, and it was science and math, science and math. And now I love the fact that science is proving that we actually need the art and coming full circle and bringing it back in. And I also think that we've been optimizing for productivity since the Industrial Revolution and pushed the arts aside because we thought that would make us happy. And it's clear by the rise in mental health and other things that didn't necessarily make us happy.
Well, let me push back on that. I know we've had the rise in mental health. Explain why there's a clear correlation. It's not just that there's a causation.
Well, I think there's a lot of the mental health comes from stress and anxiety that I think is this constant push for performance, productivity, and so I think that, and pushing out some of these birthrights that is pure joy. I mean, walking in nature is the most neuroaesthetic place there is, and we end up spending our time now in buildings more than we do out in
Did
nature.
you all coin the phrase, you use it, nature deficit disorder? Is that my memory
Actually,
from
an
the book?
author wrote
That's
a
our
book,
friend
right?
Richard Louv,
Yeah.
who is extraordinary, and it's really quite a phenomena where we need nature. E.O. Wilson again said that we humans were in nature 99.8% of humanity. And so we're not used to being inside, right? And it's so interesting that the biophilic movement to bring nature inside, I think, is part of the trying to sort of balance that out. But we know that cortisol lowers by 25% in just 15 minutes when you're in nature. That's amazing. Homeostasis is sort of immediate, this sense of wonder and awe, which really, awe and wonder, they sound like sort of really poetic and romantic words, but from a physiological perspective, they're really also about survival. Awe certainly makes us feel like we're part of something bigger, which is important to be in a community, but it also, interestingly, makes you want to take more risk. So if you want to grow and learn and move, you have to take risks. You have to get outside of your circle.
And why is that?
Well, I think it's an evolutionary phenomena, but in terms of what happens in the brain, in terms of being able to take risks, it has to do with lowering cortisol and increasing reward. So neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin come on. It's a reward mechanism, a form of pleasure that makes you want to know more. And I actually think that ties to curiosity. Curiosity is what's over the hill, what's around the corner, and it makes you feel good, right? It's particularly serotonin that's really a driver.
Yeah,
So-
no, I was just going to say that there was an experiment a neuroscientist Bo Lotto did with Cirque du Soleil. People who watch Cirque du Soleil talk about awe and wonder for the first time and then track them, and they were more likely to take risks in life after seeing that.
So yeah, that was an amazing part. And one of the things, you've mentioned E.O. Wilson twice, the great evolutionary biologist who was, I think, here in Aspen a couple of times.
Nice.
And what impressed me in the book, because sometimes people who love art and love the humanities, they get upset that people in technology and science don't appreciate it, but they don't make the effort to appreciate science. And they say, oh, I can't do science. I'm not a scientist. And, you know, the thing about your book is you can learn anything.
Yeah.
You can learn science, you can learn to doodle, you can learn even to dance. I mean, Damien Wetzel was here. He taught Sidney Harmon how to do pirouettes, so anybody can learn
And you know,
to
from
dance.
working on this together, we realized there's a great similarity, both scientists and artists. It's all about asking questions,
Right.
asking the right question, and then going deeper and deeper. So there's more similarity than.
But I was impressed at how much you got from E.O. Wilson and some of the scientists. You want to describe that?
Yeah, you know, the science is, we think about it like exercise. Once we knew more about exercise from a scientific point of view, we were able to do better. Once we knew more about nutrition, we were able to think about how food influences our body. Once we learned more about sleep, we knew more about what happened. We haven't really understood how the arts change our brains and bodies and how that can measurably help us understand physical health, mental health, learning. And so, you know, the way the book is organized is in those kind of very, I think of them as sort of the moments in our lives, all the different ways that we do things, but then what shows up as an art. And so just a couple of examples. We know that when we are chronic pain, like headaches, we know that dance and things like virtual reality actually help us with pain. And there's a belief that that has to do with distraction. So, you know, sometimes we think, oh, we shouldn't get distracted, but the fact that the brain can't do two things at once, can't focus on pain and also on pleasure, it chooses pleasure, which I think is a really sort of extraordinary thing, right? Some other interesting work was around creativity. Charles Lim, who's at UCSF, has done not just one, but I think now 6 studies understanding what I consider to be the seat of creativity, and that's prefrontal. So when you're a great artist like Renee Fleming, and you are practicing and you're performing, you want to make sure that you've got it right? You're practicing, you're critiquing, you're listening. But when you're in a flow state and you're totally absorbed, that part of the brain turns off, and you can improv, you sort of have that creative flow. That part of the brain is in the front of the brain. So understanding how do you turn that on and off is really important if you're going to be literally creating new material, things that have never happened before. So Charles did that work with music, he did it with rappers, he did it with spoken word people, with caricature. Is that the right term? Where you draw a picture, like, you know, funny pictures?
Caricatures.
And portraiture. And he's continuing to do it. And I think it's really amazing that in every art form, we have this ability to turn that part of our brain, that's the self-critic, on and off. And so I think those are some interesting, you know, sort of scientific pieces that are coming forward. And I mentioned a little bit about the learning.
You also mentioned Renee Fleming.
I did.
And wow, she's sitting there.
Yeah,
Hey,
wow.
Renee.
And that's the power of art.
And she's involved.
And she's yes, she is. Renee is truly an inspiration in the field and also in the work that she's done. You know, Renee is the co-chair of the Neuroarts Blueprint that you mentioned, or that Dan mentioned earlier, which is really a really audacious plan to make the arts and part of mainstream medicine and public health. So Renee is the co-chair of that work, and she also is now the World Health Organization's ambassador for arts and health. And just recently it was announced, I think maybe yesterday, that she's now a Kennedy Center Honors Award. So amazing.
We have Renee, stand up a second.
And maybe while we're waiting for the microphone, let me just add one more piece. Renee is not only leading this, she just announced that she's funding something called the Renee Fleming Young Investigator Grant program through the NeuroArts Blueprint. So bringing young people who have a curiosity and a passion to do this work, graduates out of college or postdocs or graduate students, to work with scientists, so artists and scientists coming together. And this field is really interdisciplinary, right? So she's seeding the future of this field, and it's really exciting. So thank you for that.
And tell us, what is the NeuroArts Blueprint?
So one of the reasons why I was interested in that is that I've learned that academia, and it's true for us too, can be siloed in some ways, and certainly research in health and medicine, it's not really encouraged that one is collaborative with other universities, even with other departments. But we know some intractable problems and some of the mental health issues we're facing and some of the loneliness and isolation. We need human connection. And we also, I think the collaboration would be very useful. So we're trying to encourage people in university to collaborate between artists and researchers. That's the idea. I wish I had had those opportunities when I was younger, and I do think there'll be some interesting things because of what Ivy said. We're all very imaginative in terms of how we're problem solving, and artists have to do that too. But the NeuroArts Blueprint is so powerful. You all have to read Susan and Ivy's book because they have created a plan. The blueprint itself is much broader than what we're doing. I love what we're doing at the National Institutes of Health with the Kennedy Center, but it's very music-based, and that's because that's where the research has been for a long time. But the NeuroArts Blueprint is taking into account all of the ways in which art, as nature, architecture, have an effect on us. And it's incredibly exciting. The field is exploding. It's also the ambition is to create a field. Climate was only recently it became a field. So it's that notion that we have to consolidate all the information and all of these different silos and make a much bigger noise. That's something I really know how to do.
Bravo! Bravissimo. Ivy, we're talking about the science, and there's a concept in there because you were talking, Susan, about how it actually almost rewires the mind. But neuroplasticity, explain to us that.
Yeah, well, we're born with over 100 billion neurons, and over time, the idea is that these connections need to be made, and art and aesthetics is the greatest or quickest way to make those connections because of the saliency to these experiences, which are very emotional. So that's also why it's super important that you put yourself in new situations, looking at new art, doing new things, because I also learned that over time, these neurons can be pruned. And so, we only have so much software capacity, and then they throw out the old ones. So when I learned I could get rid of my first husband that way, it was really good information.
But so we've been able to scan the brain too?
Yeah, it's only in the last 20 years that we can get inside the brain to actually see these things and see where different parts of the brain light up during different art activities.
Well, here's something that's not in your book. I'm going to throw you a curveball because it just popped in my mind. Because we want to map the brain, do the neural network, see exactly how it works, which of course leads us to artificial neural networks and how we're going to create it. Do you think artificial intelligence could ever have sort of a sense of the arts or creativity?
Yeah, great question. So this is my individual perspective, which first of all is that as AI comes in more, we're going to be handing off a lot of the rational things that we do to AI. Because you could say in some ways, since we've been building up for productivity, we've been a little bit like a machine. And there are some things that we can hand off. And therefore, we have to overamp those things that make us human, that only humans can do, and get more imaginative, more creative, because we will need to co-create with AI. Just like with digital photography, we couldn't even imagine it was a threat to regular photography until we started playing with it, and then sure enough, together, digital photography and humans brought imaging to a new height. So I do believe that this is an invitation with AI coming in for us to actually amplify our sensorial systems, because machines have sensors, but they don't have senses. And so that's why this work is even more important, and it's time for us to exercise. Your imagination is a muscle that we have to exercise. And these arts are all about expressing ourselves. So I think it's a call to action for us all to also start expressing ourselves and exercising that skill of imagination.
We talk about flourishing in the book. You know, I think we all don't want to just cope. We want to thrive. We want to reach our fullest potential. And I think this is a really good segue to Fred Johnson. Fred is in the Flourishing chapter. Fred is a musician. He's also the person at the Straz Theater that does all of the work with the outreach programs, bringing arts to vets, working with immigrant communities, working with sex trafficking, and really bringing this integration of arts for health and well-being. And so maybe we could invite Fred up.
Fred, my man. Frederick Johnson, for those of you who didn't know, and you're going to both perform and talk.
Yeah, I guess.
At the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, there's something that AI can't do. And it's truly look into your eyes and see and feel this heartbeat you have, just like the beat of the drum, as ancient as time itself. This sharing of breath that we do creates a feeling on the inside that's special, special inside of you. Long, long ago, communities would gather and sing, sing, sing together, and dance and dance and dance, and dream and dream and dream how together we could be through that simple journey of breath and imagination. Communities can heal. It's simple. We share it in common. Everybody take a breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. That's community. That's what connects all of us. That's the great connector. That's one of the most important components in science that we know about, that we share. We can have all kinds of intellectual conversations about what things might divide us, but the one thing that we have in common is the breath of life itself. It's our life source. Some of us put conversation on that breath source. Some of us put song. But it's the things that we share in common that are really right here, close to us, next to us, that starts that healing process. Most of the time when we have a pain or something's bothering you, it's because something's a little out of balance, a little out of whack. And long, long before words were written down, in the great traditions of West Africa, all of the conversation was narrative. This speaking to you like this feels totally different than me singing to you. You hear it in a different way. They say the longest distance traveled is the distance between the head and the heart. But the melodic voice shortens that distance, 'cause you don't just hear me, you feel my breath, don't you? So that's what this journey of art and science, whether it's song or whether it's movement, whether it's storytelling, imagination, it's an opportunity for us to really, really connect. More importantly, for us to connect from the inside out. The thing that's exciting to me about having the opportunity to work all these years now with Susan is that, you know, as an artist, my entire life, I've felt that what I do helps people to heal. It helps people to connect. It helps people to feel and feel better. I've always felt that. If I did a concert for 100,000 people, I could feel the energy of the people, and I like soared on their energy, and there was a connection. But to have science and research now tell us this is what happens to your brain. This is what happens to your neurological system. It ought be enough to just come to the theater to have a good time. But what science and research is teaching us now, I work at the Strass Center for the Performing Arts in Tampa, Florida. We have 6 live theaters, and our largest theater, our Opera House and our Broadway House, has 2,600 seats. And so science and research is beginning to show us that 2,600 people on any given night walk into that theater. They come from work, they come from wherever, with all kinds of different cultural backgrounds, different political backgrounds. 2,600 people come into the theater, the lights flicker, and for 2.5 hours, we agree to take a journey together. We agree to laugh together, to cry together, to contemplate, to think together, to celebrate together. And science and research shows us that when you leave the theater, you're healthier from the inside out in terms of your brainwaves and your neurology than you were when you walked in. Now, you might reach and pick up your phone and check your emails and be right back where you were before. But the reality is those shared experiences give us an opportunity to, from the inside out, know and understand what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Hey, for 45 years, you've been using the arts to empower and enable and help underserved and underprivileged communities. Tell me about that.
So a lot of that is based upon the fact that, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be respected, they want to know that they matter. A lot of communities that I've worked in and that I grew up in, you know what I mean? Look, I was one of those kids. First 5.5 years of my life, I was a ward of the state. So from like 18 months to 5.5 months, I was in and out of orphanages and foster homes. And so, I didn't get that sensory being held all the time. So I was that kid that was in the corner rocking and making noise, because that's how I calmed myself. That's how I put myself to sleep. That's how I function during the day. The body has a need for sound and it has a need for motion. And so because a lot of people didn't really understand me, a lot of people, took me home for a couple of days and said, nah, let me just give him back. I'm not sure, Thankfully, Pearl and Robert Johnson decided to take the journey with me. And so I was one of those kids that, like in school, I was always hearing music in my head. So I was always humming, I was always rocking, I was always making motion, and I was always banging on something. I was always banging, I was hearing rhythm. Well, this is a box drum, and I get paid lots of money to beat on wood now. But there were plenty of teachers and people who said there was something wrong with me. There were plenty of teachers that were ready to categorize me, and they would always, back in the day, they would put you out in the hall. Mm-hmm. Right? If you were a problem in the classroom, they put you out in the hallroom. Well, that was the wrong place to put me, because every kid that went by, I had a conversation with them. But they would always invite me back in the classroom when it was time for there to be some kind of a singing, like a choir or something like that, because they wanted my voice. Right? So my point is, what I do is create an opportunity for people to feel that they're heard, for people to imagine and dream. For instance, Sarah, if you could go anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
India.
Okay. So just imagine, Sarah, you and I were taking a journey on a plane, Sarah, a beautiful plane, and we're flying to India. We're gonna taste food from all around the country and look at all the colorful clothes, and we'll meet new people and hear new languages we've never heard before. not feel good?
Yay.
Yeah.
So, we have an opportunity to amplify imagination. Oftentimes, I've found a child or even a mom or a dad will have a problem they don't really want to talk about. They don't really want to talk about. They don't want to share their most intimate secrets with you because they don't believe that you'll hear them. They don't believe that you'll understand. And so what I do is I listen to them and I ask them, this is an ancient tradition. I've had the good blessing of studying with two great teachers, one from Ghana and one from Senegal. And the Jali tradition, the Griot and Jali tradition, the Griot tradition is a tradition of reminding the community of the history. Like there are families and they sing the history. This is long before words were written down. And then the Jali also, teaches history, but also is that umbilical cord between what you feel and what you desire and creation. And so the belief is, if you feel strongly and if you articulate that, and then if that's turned into music and it's sung, or if it's turned into a dance, then it becomes a part of you inwardly, and creation recognizes you and recognizes what your desires are, help you to heal, help you achieve, help you to do whatever it is that you desire to do in your life, because you're never alone. And so what I and some of my colleagues have done over the years is gone into communities and listened to people and turned their stories into song, turned their imaginings into song, got them to sing and dance together, got them to feel safe. I just read a book, relative to the vagus nerve, and, essentially the philosophy is we all just want to feel safe. And there's so much disruption that comes from not feeling safe, not feeling heard, not feeling loved, not feeling a part, not feeling that what you have to say matters, or that what you think matters, or that you matter. Let me do a quick thing with you. When I say your name, say your name.
Ivy.
Say your name.
Walter.
Ivy.
Say your name.
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 Ivy.
Now this is a little song that I sing all over the world. It's a song that brings us together. So every time I say your name,
Ivy.
you gotta say your name. Here we go, I'll just do it quickly. Say your name. Say your name.
Ivy.
Now some people in the back are going, gotta open your mouth. It's a community thing, right? Oh, say your name.
Ivy.
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 Now this simple song, this simple melody, you couldn't imagine how many places I've gone and people have smiled and come up to me and said, this was such a simple thing, but I'd never quite heard before my name in that way. And it's designed just to remind you you're created unique and beautiful like no one else in the world. And that name you've been given is beautiful. And when it sounds, it doesn't just sound in the world, it resonates inside of you, 'cause that's who you are. One more time. Say your name.
Ivy.
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 Doesn't that feel good?
Bravo. So, Ivy and Susan, building on that, the book talks a lot about building community.
Yep.
Tell me about, because you're coming out of what Fred just showed of how we can build a community of people who feel disempowered.
Yeah, we've done some really interesting work in Baltimore with kids that are using arts to rebuild their sense of self. And Fred mentioned safety. And safety isn't just the absence of threat, it's the place where you feel like you can share yourself. And feel that you can allow yourself to be vulnerable. So we talk in the book about art creates culture, culture creates community, and community creates humanity. But that doesn't happen from the top down. It happens from the community out. And so there's a number of indigenous cultures that we talked with. There are over 5,000 active indigenous communities in the world. And they don't have a word for art because it's how they live. And I think we can really take a page from that. It's about ritual and tradition, food, food. But the way that we come together to mourn, to grieve, to celebrate, to join together. And there's an example in the book by Manuel Pratt, who is a MacArthur Award winner, architect, community organizer in the south side of Chicago. And they bought, with pooling funds from the community, 12 sort of blight city blocks. And they co-created first a garden, and then a workshop, and then a tented area, timbered and tented area for coming together to celebrate and sing for their harvest and for the joy of coming together. And they have literally now expanded to another 24 city blocks. And it's a really good example of how in a city like Chicago, you can go back to the basics and really build out a community that has trust, has respect, has a sense of values and belief in what's possible. So I think community is, we are hardwired for community. And Vivek Murthy is going to talk tomorrow.
And there's something essential in the arts about community. I mean, the arts are not done except for to try to share emotions.
And beliefs and structure. Synchronicity is sort of an extraordinary thing. I think we just experienced a sense of synchronicity. We march together in war. We sing together in church. This idea of physiological synchronicity is so important for building that sense of community and that sense of structure.
We've lost it a bit.
And belonging,
Totally.
right? And a sense of loneliness. We have lost it. But it's not that hard to get back. You don't have to build 12 city blocks. You can start by doing things in your community, going to the grocery store, saying hello. A smile turns out to be an amazing way to just connect with someone. So, we can start with where we are, and I think that's what we have to do, right?
Yeah. Ivy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say also murals that happen within cities is a way to tell the community's story. And we just heard earlier at an event we were at of a project where in hospitals they're putting murals on all the walls to tell the story.
Yeah, Laurie Tish and others for the illumination.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I mean,
Is
it's
Laurie
simple
here?
things like that.
What?
Rick, there's
Yeah, there's Rick, who does it too. Thank you for all your...
one other thing about community is that I think it's worth mentioning. The NeuroArts Blueprint has started what we're calling community neuroarts coalitions. And this is in communities right now. We have 6 communities around the country, and it's going to grow around the world. We have hundreds of communities that want to come together where the hospitals, the museums, the healthcare providers, the community organizations, the artists are coming together through the lens of arts to really address very intractable problems in their communities. So you have 500 of those and you have 5,000 of those. They start to connect. And I think that network of communities is the other way that you start to really shift humanity.
When we talk about centers of innovation, and we talk about the tech revolution, industrial revolution, creating everything from Silicon Valley to whatever. If you start with the greatest centers of innovation, Florence in 1500, let's just say, with Michelangelo and Leonardo and others, it's because the arts and the sciences flourish as part of a community. And likewise, we got away from that. You said, Ivy, from Sputnik and all the way through the invention of the computer and coding, we got a little bit away from that. I am sensing a flow away from Silicon Valley into places where the arts flourish, whether it's Austin and Nashville, maybe even New Orleans, my hometown. people who have a sense of community built on creativity in the arts are finding ways to be entrepreneurs in the next wave of the digital revolution.
It's a startup community too. Have you heard of Meow Wolf? Do you know?
Sure, yeah.
So right, okay. Meow Wolf started by a bunch of kids who couldn't get in an art gallery, and they were like, "We're going to create our own thing." And now it's grown so dramatically, and there's other kinds of immersive experiences. So I think the sense of needing to make and create and share ourselves is part of building that sense of community, and it's popping up everywhere. So it is the health of an ecosystem of a field is about all these different levels of public-private partnership, of entrepreneurs coming together, and this field has got that, and it's so much energy, and you need energy to change something. You need energy to make a movement, and that's what's so amazing about this. So it's from the bottom up, it's from the top down, it's from the sides in, and I think that's extremely exciting.
Ivy, what's being done for specific diseases and syndromes?
Well, dance for Parkinson's, I mean, which sounds counterintuitive, is something that through writing this book, how it increases gait and cognition and all kinds of things. There's a new project coming out of MIT where they're using 40 hertz of sound and light to initiate clearing the plaque in the brain for people with dementia. I mean, phenomenal things like that. Some digital
Alzheimer's
games.
in your book plays arts play a big role.
Yeah, no, even digital games for kids with ADHD. I mean, the list goes on. And that's why in the book we wanted to make sure we talked about physical health, mental health, people who have specific issues, but also people who just want to flourish and have a better life.
Fred, were you leaning in there?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's also the greatest way for us to regain a sense of our humanity. The arts are a wonderful connector and just a really, really important way for us to kind of connect the head and the heart. And they say that the sign of a good book, in the Baha'i faith, there was one of the leaders in the Baha'i faith, his name was Shoghi Effendi. And Shoghi Effendi's responsibility was to write letters to the rulers of the world, convincing them that we should stop warring with each other, and the faith traditions fighting with each other. And they say that Shoghi Effendi would write a letter, and then when he would finish writing the letter, he would sing the letter. And if it didn't sing well, then he would go back and he would rewrite the words. So they say that if a book sings well, then it has great value. I'm just going to read a little bit here, sing a little bit from, this is Your Brain on Art. You have to get this book. You see, what these studies help illuminate is how the arts amplify the social, emotional, and cognitive elements of learning at an early age. And it goes back to brain plasticity. That's what it is. Think of how much is learned in the early years of a life. Crawling, walking, talking. These learned skills are sculpting the circuitry of the brain through plasticity. As you get a little older and begin to practice skills, neurons connect and those activities become easier. Practice a song and soon you'll know it by heart, they say, which technically speaking is really by brain. Learn a dance and soon you can perform its steps without consciously thinking, because the neurons connect to dendrites, and over time that builds a habit.
Dendrites and plasticity. Well done. All right, anybody got some questions? Otherwise, I'll keep it. Yes, sir. Yes, two sirs. But then we'll do a ma'am.
Hi, I was curious to know what you think about creating, using prompts like Midjourney for generative AI. And I was also curious to know, are all the arts, how are they different from singing, dancing, to creating art, how it expresses neuroplasticity in your brain?
Well, I'll answer the first part. There's actually new job descriptions being created in art schools called prompt designers, because I think in some cases the art will come in and what is the question, and then how do you build on that question to, to prompt the AI to create something new. So that's going to be a new discipline. And in terms of the existing art forms.
Yeah, so there are some sort of basic science pieces around how neuroplasticity works related to arts and aesthetics, and we talked a little bit about that tonight. But each art form works in very different ways, and they work. So it's very complex. You mentioned the brain initiative and the brain map. We're actually getting ready to start working on a brain arts map to really be able to see what does different art forms do, what do different sensory systems do, and then how do you cross-reference those with different diseases and disorders and also different well-being states. And so it really is an incredibly complex structure. And that makes sense, right? It makes a lot of sense. We know, for example, that music actually impacts multiple parts of the brain simultaneously. That's extraordinary. And because of the way that happens at the end of our lives when we may be having memory issues, cognitive decline, we're able to call different parts of that forward because it's stored in different places. And I think, somatosensory is also the cortex that brings in touch. You have over 4 million nerve endings in your body, 3,000 on each finger, just to start. Your lips have more nerve endings than anything, so kiss more people. It feels really good.
Wait, real quick. When Leonardo was doing the Mona Lisa smile,
Yeah.
he dissected the human lips,
Amazing.
tracked every nerve, and tracked every muscle of the
wow.
face, and whether or not that muscle, like if you could raise your eyebrow, can you use that muscle to do your lip? And something I don't want you to try, but he figured that you can pucker your top lip alone and both lips, but not your bottom lip alone. All these things
Wow.
are a part of the art of
And
the Mona Lisa.
And think about that. If you really understood the unbelievable physiology that you have just in your lips,
Just in your lips.
it's extraordinary how we would amplify our own realities, but also our communities, our families. And I think that you said it earlier, curiosity. It's that curious nature about who we are and these amazing mechanisms that we have that machines will never replace, but we need to honor it, and I think that's what the arts really do. So yeah, and certainly reward and pleasure, those are systems that whether you're the maker or the beholder, but there's different attributes of both making and beholding too that are worth really looking more carefully at and understanding. Yeah. I have to say one more thing. Paint. Yes, so we had a conversation this morning with a guy that has been exploring. Okay, he started Lionsgate Film, and he has been really interested in the book. And he said today that he's been really curious in understanding the color white because he realized that there are hundreds of colors of white, just the color white for your wall. I think that's curiosity, right? I mean,
And when Steve Jobs was trying to do the iPod, he went through the entire Pantone catalog of all the whites
Oh,
and
I didn't
said
know that.
none of them were good enough.
Yep.
And he had to invent a new type of
I
white
did not know that.
to
There you
make
go.
to make the
There you go.
iPod work. Yes, sir, because you were called on too, yeah. And then
So you touched on this in your answer just a few minutes ago, but much of the discussion tonight has been on the benefits of, creating art or the community effects of art. But I'm interested in the perception of art because, there's this old adage that art is in what does art and is in the eye of the beholder. And I nearly flunked out of a basic drawing class in college because, the teacher would basically have us do a quick drawing of a nude, and then she'd go around saying good, good, bad, good,
Yep.
good, bad.
that-
And I'd ask, all right, what are the criteria? And she
Yeah.
could not answer the question.
Yeah,
So what
that's a
I'm-
huge problem.
Yeah.
Huge
So what
problem.
I'm wondering is that given current technology or future technology for brain imaging, can one get at the essence of how people respond to specific art and what, and answer the
Yes.
question is, what is art? Obviously, it's going to be different for every person, but are there, distinct properties of art that are universally
It's a great question, and I think it's actually fundamental to human experience is art is in the eye of the beholder. About 25 years ago, Samir Zeki, University College London, did an experiment where he looked at beauty. So what visual art, what do you think is beautiful? And what he found is that that part of the brain is in the prefrontal cortex that identifies beauty. That's true for all of us. But because of where we come from, what we know, our lived experiences, our genetics, what I think is beautiful is going to be different than what you think is beautiful. And we don't allow for that, right? We have trends, we have bright, shiny objects. But why, let's just say you and I both say that's beautiful. The reason I think it's beautiful is going to be different than why you think. And maybe there's some overlap, but perception is really critical. And there's a part of the brain called the default mode network. I don't know if any of you know a little bit about that, but it's the part of the brain that goes to work when you're still, when you're quiet, when you're not bringing in all of this world. And that's a really beautiful part because it's where you daydream, it's where you mind wander, it's where you decide what's beautiful and what's not, it's where you decide what you like and you don't like. And so the saliency network and the default mode network are right next to each other. And it's really important that we allow ourselves the diversity of perception and honoring the differences and learning about them from each other. So
Yep.
it's a great question.
I can't see there because of these lights. I'm going to let Ivy call on
I don't
somebody
see,
over there.
there's no hand up over there, is there? Why don't you just
All
stand?
right,
Oh,
right.
there we go.
Here.
Right. Okay, sorry. Ivy got to call. I call it Will. Okay, two last questions, you and then you. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's been to Buenos Aires, but art is just all over. And we have mental health issues here. They don't have as many there because it's flowing with art, and psychologists are part of the culture. It's $15 an hour. And I think our schools kind of broke this. As a child, I couldn't draw a horse, so I never really pursued art. I'd look at art and appreciate it. But I think we have to really explore communities where art is part of the culture.
That's a really good comment, and let's get this last one here too, and then
Yeah,
we'll
you're
let the panel
absolutely
take them
right.
both.
You don't need, in that case, the experiment has already been done, right?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist, working on the interface of trauma work and the neurosciences of sensory, the sensory systems and sensory integration. I work across primarily 7 sensory systems and do individualized assessments of those who are traumatized who work with me. I'm also an infant mental health specialist. And if I had met you when you were young, we would have encouraged everything that was coming out of you as part of who you are and the healing and the attachment needs that you had. So let me just say you're an incredible testament
Well, thank
to
you.
the people who loved you.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
I'm going to let the panel, because we only have 1 minute left.
Oh,
so
sorry.
to
I
respond.
wanted to ask
Oh, go ahead. I didn't know.
neuroarchitecture. Can you speak to neuroarchitecture? I'm working in that sphere as well now, helping people to design their spaces around them to fit with their nervous systems and the healing of their nervous systems.
And
So
maybe
maybe-
I could let everybody have a chance to give a quick
Milan, but also.
answer, and maybe start with Fred. Use whatever these things to be your launch pad in our remaining 50 seconds.
50 seconds, go Ivy.
No, I wanted to address your question because Susan and I teamed up on a project in 2019 at the Milan Salone Design Fair, which was the first experience where we gave the public the felt sense of this idea of how important space and architecture is. We designed 3 different living rooms, different music, different scent, different textures, colors, lighting. Each participant went into each room wearing a band, where Susan's lab and Google did an algorithm of in which room was your body the most at ease or least stressed, not your mind. And this was the whole point. and because it was taking your physiology, and you would stay in each room, no devices, no talking, for 5 minutes, just being. It was called a space for being, sensing, feeling. And then you go to the next room, sense, feel, and again, different colors, textures, all the aesthetic elements. At the end, you took off the band, gave it to a band tender, the data was downloaded, and because we're Google, we then deleted it. But we, not without showing, we first asked the participant, which room did you like the best? And they would say, oh, room number 2, you know, I love the color blue, or I saw it. Well, your body, look at this, your body loved room number 3. And people were like, how could that be? And it's like, because your body is feeling all the time, and we're so unaware of it. And we go in, we're in our cognitive mind, and I like that. And then they would say things like, well, what's the right answer? Which is the right room? We're like, oh my God, no, there is no right answer. The whole point is that it's very individual, but people loved it because they got a learning and awareness that because of all the sensory systems we have, our body is feeling all the time. And so we have to, the idea was we have agency over our environment. And if we can plug in and understand that, we might change things that are in our environment. But Susan's also doing this
Intentional
gathering,
spaces
in
summer.
November, because architecture is so important. It's been designed for, again, efficiency and not for the human. And I think we have to get back to that. I mean, in the ancient times, architects had to be doctors, philosophers, because they had to understand what goes on in the space, how the body moves through it. So it's very important. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's the ultimate.
Fred, Ivy, Susan, I was like totally fascinated.
Oh, thank you. Well, we're honored.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great man.
Thank you.